Now to the latest on President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan.
This morning, millions of Americans facing mounting student debt on the verge of having their balances wiped clean.
And reaction to the student loan forgiveness plan has been pouring in on social media.
There's a debate over fairness tonight that reaches far and wide across our country.
Okay, so what all does Biden's plan actually entail? The first thing and the biggest thing is free college. Except it's not really free, but we'll get there. Borrowers can receive up to $20,000 towards their student loans if they are a Pell Grant recipient, and if they aren't a Pell Grant recipient, they can receive $10,000 towards their loan. A Pell Grant is financial aid given from the government that doesn't need to be paid back. So this year in 2022, the maximum amount you could receive in a Pell Grant is $6,985. To qualify for this, the government says you have to demonstrate exceptional financial need. And what that means is your expected college costs have to be very high and your expected family contribution has to be very low. And where those points meet, that's where the Pell Grant is. Also, Pell Grants are reserved for people who haven't been incarcerated and haven't earned a bachelor's degree yet. So people that have received that Pell Grant in the past will be eligible for the $20,000 in student loan forgiveness. Also, to qualify for the $20,000 forgiveness and the $10,000 forgiveness, you have to have a family income or your own personal income under $125,000 or $250,000 for a married couple. And the loans have to be held by the federal government, which over 90% are. Okay, so the second thing that you need to know from this plan is that it will extend the student loan moratorium again. And if you don't know, a student loan moratorium means people aren't required to pay down their debt on their student loans. And something crazy that you might not know is that no one has had to make a required payment or pay interest on their student loans while Biden has been president. Okay, well, you might be thinking, when is the last time people have been required to make a minimum payment on their student loans? Student loan payments were first halted March 13th of 2020. So the last time someone's been required to make a minimum payment was probably early March or late February of 2020. This most recent extension is supposed to end in January of 2023, but the White House has put out deadlines in the past and then just extended it again. So we'll really see in January if people are gonna be required to start paying off their student loans. Also, the cutoff for this student loan forgiveness is June 30th of 2022. So most of the people that got loans for this upcoming semester probably got it before that, so they'll be included in this forgiveness plan. But if you were to get a loan right now for next semester, you would not be eligible to receive that student loan forgiveness. Okay, so the third thing this plan does is changing how student loans have to be paid off. The past regulation for your minimum payment was that it could not exceed 10% of your discretionary income. With this new plan, this will be lowered to 5% of your discretionary income. And also, the non-discretionary income will be raised to $28,000 a year, which is about $15 an hour. This means that if you were making $30,000 a year, your discretionary income would be $2,000 per year. And then we multiply that by 0.05 for 5%, and we get that your annual payment would only be $100 or a little over $8 per month that you would be required to pay on your student loans. So your income would drastically affect how much money you'd be required to pay on your student loans. Also, if you're making that required minimum payment on time, the government would also be paying for any unpaid interest, so your balance would never grow if you're paying on time. And if you're making below that $28,000 threshold, you have no required minimum payment. Okay, so the fourth thing you need to know about this plan is that it proposes to create a college debt watch list. So basically, colleges / programs that graduate students with high amounts of debt would be put on a watch list that students would be able to see when applying to these schools. So theoretically, you could be able to see that this school over here consistently graduates people with a low amount of debt, and this one over here, these graduates have far more debt. The thought process is that colleges would be motivated to graduate their students with less debt to avoid this debt watch list. Because if they were super high on that list and consistently every year, it's like if you go to this school, you're graduating with tons of debt, maybe students would start avoiding that school. So if they want to avoid the list, they try to bring down the amount of debt that their students are graduating with. The fifth thing you need to know is the price tag of this plan. To do this, let's look at some statements put out by the White House and then some statements put out by other organizations, and then we'll do some simple math to see if we can give a ballpark estimate of how much this plan will actually cost. Okay, when I read some of these statements, keep in mind that the total amount of borrowers in the US is 45 million. Okay, first, 27 million are eligible for the $20,000 student loan forgiveness. 20 million Americans will have their entire balance removed. 43 million borrowers will benefit from this plan. Nearly all community college debt will be forgiven. And lastly, the White House put out a statement that says this plan will cost $240 billion over a 10-year period. However, there are many different numbers floating around about how much this plan would cost. For example, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania gave its estimate, and it would cost between $500 billion and $1 trillion over a 10-year period. And the Nonprofit Committee for a Responsible Budget gave its estimate at $500 billion. But let's see if we can do a little bit of math to get a ballpark range. All right, so the Biden administration said that 27 million people are eligible for the $20,000 in student loan relief. So we'll start off with that number. So 27 million multiplied by 20,000, we're at $540 billion. That's a number that we actually know, given that the numbers that the White House put out are actually right. But then we also have to kind of guess how many people would be receiving the $10,000 in student loan relief. And if 60%, because the 27 million is 60% of 45 million, so we have 40% left, which is the 18 million borrowers left that could potentially be eligible to receive the $10,000. So let's just say, and this is just an estimate, that half of those people are eligible to receive that full amount of $10,000. So let's do 9 million multiplied by 10,000, and that equals $90 billion. So we add the 540 billion plus the 90 billion, and we're at $630 billion. But we can't assume that every single person will accept that student loan forgiveness. So I'll use a 90% acceptance rate, which brings the number down to $567 billion as a very rough estimate, and not even including all of the other details in the plan. And to go even further, there are 144 million taxpayers in the US, which means that each person would be responsible for paying a little over $3,900 to fund this plan. Okay, now I'll share what I like, what I dislike, and my overall thoughts on the plan. First, I like the idea of having some type of accountability with a college debt watch list. It would be even better if colleges were forced to break it down by major. So we could see that on average, the person that graduates with this degree is making this amount of money and has this much debt. I think this could possibly do two things. First, it incentivizes colleges to graduate students with as little debt as possible because they don't want to be on top of that government debt watch list, because they don't want students avoiding their school because they're number one for producing students with a lot of debt. Secondly, students could avoid going to schools that typically are associated with high levels of debt. And think about it this way, the government requires publicly traded companies to report accurate financial information to protect investors. But I think it could be the same thing with investing in a college, because students are investing their money or their parents' money to hopefully get a return in the form of a good job. I think the government should be protecting the students by requiring the colleges to present financial information like the amount of debt and the amount of income that those graduates are receiving for each degree. I have mixed thoughts on covering interest payments. So if you make your required minimum payment on time, your interest would be covered and it wouldn't your balance wouldn't grow. But if you're only making $30,000 and that means you're only paying like $8 a month for your student loan, is this motivating you to stay in a low-paying job when you should be trying to figure out how to increase your income? I'm not really sure, and I could kind of see both sides of the argument. Okay, now for what I dislike. The first thing is this will actually raise college prices. Right now, students practically have a voucher to go to school from the US government. You can get whatever type of loan you need to pay for your education because the government wants you to go that badly. So these colleges are going to keep raising their prices because the demand for going to school is still there. A major shift in demand has to occur for colleges to stop raising their prices so much. Because if people keep going and the government keeps guaranteeing the loans to go, then they're going to keep raising those prices. Okay, so the second thing I don't like is the income thresholds. I don't see why anyone making over $75,000 is receiving student loan forgiveness. This is well above the average income in America, and I think this is just way too high, and especially over $100,000 and people could still be eligible. And while I know most of the money allotted would go to the Pell Grant recipients and people making less money, I think that the cutoff should have been $75,000, and I think this should have been adjusted for different levels of expenses, because $75,000 in Los Angeles is a lot different than $75,000 in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. I think one size fits all is a bad approach, because maybe in a big city, the $90,000 equals making like 50 or 60 in another area. So I think it really depends, but this should have been targeted towards the very lowest income people, like people making under 50,000 or under 40,000. And if you're gonna do something like this, it should all go to them. Like people that are making over $100,000 in a rural area, like they don't need student loan forgiveness. Okay, so the next thing that I don't really like is that nothing is really free. Like I talked about earlier, there's a huge cost associated with this, and that is being passed from loan holders to the taxpayer. Think about the people that worked hard that already paid off their loans. The people that went to school for teaching take a lot of loans to do it and then are working in a job that doesn't make that much money. They could have spent 5-10 years paying off that debt, and now they're going to be burdened with paying for other people's debt through their tax dollars. The last thing I dislike about this plan is that it is a short-term fix that does nothing to address the long-term issues. How does this plan help solve this problem from occurring in the future? What is going to keep people from taking on too much debt and just repeat this process? Are we going to come back 10 years from now and be like, well, we got to bail out people on their student loans again because we have $1.5 trillion in student loan debt? This plan really did nothing to prevent people from going back into this much debt. For example, a useful thing that the White House should have been pursuing was teaching some type of financial education class throughout all of the high schools in America. Or they could have promoted students and parents to take advantage of the college savings plan known as a 529. People need to learn about personal finance and investing in student loans before they are $30,000 in student loan debt, and the government is just kind of ignoring that. I completely see this as a political move, and I don't think it really helps anyone. College costs are going to keep increasing, and people are going to continue to take on too much debt to go to school. But perhaps the biggest issue is that this is simply unfair to the people that worked hard to pay for their education, and now are going to be burdened by tax dollars to pay for everyone else's tuition. Alright, that's my opinion on the Biden student loan relief plan, but I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you agree with me? Do you think this plan is great? Do you think it's terrible? I really want to know what you guys think, and maybe you guys can help me think about something in a different way. And if you want more videos surrounding college and helping you get to the places you want to be, please subscribe because I have a lot of big ideas coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.